Okay, I just have one thing at the top. Sorry, I just ran here, so I'm a little out of breath. Okay, so today the President and the First Lady will host a screening of Till, the story of Mamie Till Mobley, who pursued justice after the lynching of her 14-year-old son, Emmett Till, in 1955. Invitees include cast of the film, the family of Emmett Till, students, civil rights leaders, historians, and families of victims of hate-fueled violence. The Biden administration is working to counter the corrosive effects of hate-fueled violence. In March, President Biden signed H.R. 55, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. In September, the president hosted the United We Stand Summit to rally a whole-of-society response to prevent and recover from hate-fueled violence and to foster national unity. With that, Zeke, you want to kick us off?
Thanks, Karine. The president's back from his physical. Are we going to get a readout position at some point?
So, as you just mentioned, the president has his physical this morning. It was very much, the exam was straightforward. And as you all saw, he returned to the White House to get back to work. Hopefully in a couple of hours later today, we will have a comprehensive written report from his doctor. This is going to be the same transparent way that we did it back in 2021. So you can expect to hear directly from his doctor via this comprehensive written report.
And any flags in the physical?
I don't want to get ahead of the doctor. As you saw, he just got back moments ago. They're working to finalize the memo. As soon as we have that for you all, we certainly will share that.
And the president's going to give remarks in about an hour or so on the unidentified objects that have been shot down, the Chinese spy surveillance program of the balloon. There's been that interagency review process on the way for last week. Is it safe to assume now that the president's speaking that review is now done? And should we expect to hear about these new procedures that you've been previewing the last couple of days?
So let me just first say, I'm not going to get ahead of the president in his remarks, which will happen momentarily. He will speak about the United States response to the recent aerial objects. That includes our decisive response to China's high-altitude surveillance balloon, and the president putting the safety and security of the American people always first. So that's what you'll hear from him, but I'm not going to get ahead of the details. As far as it relates to the interagency team, they are continuing to work intensively on putting forth parameters to what, this is something that the president asked them to do. So that is continuing. That work is continuing, but you will hear from the president, and he'll give an update on what has occurred over the last several days.
And just briefly, last night there were reports of the FBI searched the University of Delaware and the president's papers there from his time in the Senate. Did the president consent to that search?
So I understand the questions. I know there are going to be a few more questions about that. I'm going to say from here, as I have been for the past couple of weeks, we're going to continue to be prudent. I will not give any comments about this ongoing investigation. I would refer you to the Department of Justice.
Oh, welcome. I haven't seen you here in a long time. I know, it's been a minute.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
On the searches, regarding searches again at the University of Delaware, is there any other office space President Biden kept his records from the time he was vice president to now?
Again, I'm going to respond just the same way I just did with Zeke, is we're just going to continue to be consistent here, and I'm just not going to respond to or give comment to what's occurring right now with that investigation, and refer you to the Department of Justice.
Okay, can you say the prompt of the search?
Again, I would refer you to the Department of Justice.
One on Nikki Haley, who is now running for president. She is calling for mental competency tests for politicians 75 and up, clearly a dig at the current president. In her first speech, since announcing her run, she said America is not past our prime, it's just that our politicians are past theirs. We won't win the 21st century if we keep trusting politicians from the 20th century. Does the president have any response to that statement?
So I'll say this, again, I'm going to be very careful as I am when speaking about a candidate. She's currently, as you all know, a candidate for 2024, so I am covered by the Hatch Act, so I'm not going to speak to her directly and her comments specifically, but I will say this more broadly. we've heard these types of attacks or remarks before, and if you go back to 2020, they said that the president couldn't do it in 2020 and attacked him there, and he beat them. In 2021, when he entered the White House and worked to do his best to turn everything around with the economy tanking, with no COVID, real COVID comprehensive response, the president got to work and was able to pass the American Rescue Plan with the help of Democrats in Congress. And guess what? They turned around the economy, and he beat them there too. In 2022, when everyone was talking about a red wave and saying that we were going to get another shellacking, if you will, the president beat them at their own game there as well. And so I don't know, maybe they've forgotten, maybe they're forgetting the wins that this president has had over the last couple of years, but I'm happy to remind them anytime.
Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, Karine. The Israeli cabinet has voted to expand the Israeli settlements into the West Bank. What's the Biden administration's position on that?
So a couple of things on that, on those reporting or what we've seen. We are deeply dismayed by Israelis' announcement that they will advance thousands of new settlements and retroactively legalize 9 outposts in the West Bank that were until now illegal under Israeli law. The United States strongly opposes these unilateral measures, which exacerbates tensions, harm trust between the parties, and undermine the geographic viability of the two-state solution. During his recent trip to Israel, Secretary Blinken was clear that all parties should refrain from actions that heighten tensions and take us further away from peace. Settlement construction and expansion in the heart of the West Bank to include the legalization of outposts creates facts on the ground that undermine a two-state solution. It has been long-standing U.S. policy under both Republican and Democratic administrations that settlements are counterproductive to the cause of peace. The Biden administration maintains this firm opposition to the settlement expansion, and that is where we are with that at this time.
One other topic. Has the White House been in touch with Senator Manchin about his comments or his push that there should be talks about the debt ceiling and a reduction?
So I'll say more broadly, our team here is in regular communication with Senator Manchin. We've had clearly close relationship with him and working on key historic pieces of legislation over the past 2 years. Look, the president's stance on negotiation stands, right? Which is he does not believe, as it relates to the debt ceiling, that we should be negotiating. That is not his belief. His belief, it is a constitutional duty of Congress to deal with the debt ceiling, just like they have done multiple times, 3 times with the last president. There should not be conditions around this. We should not be negotiating. And again, if they want to talk about ways to lower the deficit, like the president has done the last 2 years, $1.7 trillion, the president has said, he said yesterday in his State of the Union address that his fiscal plan, his budget will lower the deficit by another $2 trillion. Clearly we'll have more to share on March 9th. He's willing to have that conversation. He's willing to see what Republicans are going to put forward and how they see dealing with the budget in a fiscally responsible way. But as it comes to the debt ceiling, we're going to continue to be where we are. He mentioned this yesterday in his speech, which is he doesn't believe that we should be negotiating.
That's great. I know the UK administrator was visiting East Palestine today. I was wondering, the Ohio governor was talking about efforts to federal support, said that they still have not gotten an indication from FEMA that they could get support at this point. What are the hurdles there that you guys see on the administration side?
So the governor, as you mentioned today, asked for additional public health testing and assessments. We're deploying teams from HHS and the CDC now. As you all know, these needs are much more expansive than what FEMA can meet. And so FEMA is on the front lines when there is a hurricane or tornado. As you know, you've seen the president visit devastated areas across the country. This situation is very different. And so that doesn't mean FEMA isn't supporting response. They indeed are. This is a multiple agency response that are folks that are involved, as I just mentioned, HHS, CDC, EPA as well. And they are coordinating with the Emergency Operations Center and working closely with the Ohio Emergency Management government agency. Each federal agency has its own unique role here, and we've mobilized an interagency team to get the people of Palestine, of East Palestine to be more exact, the support that they need. And look, our priority, as I said 2 days ago, is the health and safety of the community. That is indeed our top priority for the moment as we look at what they're dealing with in Ohio.
Just one more on a foreign policy topic. China yesterday warned or threatened, I guess, of countermeasures against U.S. entities in response to the shoot-down of their spy balloon. Today, they sanctioned 2 U.S. defense contractors. Is there any response there, and what does this mean for the bilateral relationship?
So the way that we see that, there's the sanctions that you just mentioned is that these are symbolic and measures and unnecessary. That's how we view them. And look, China can speak to their own actions, but again, we see them as symbolic and unnecessary. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Karine.
The other Michael.
I'm sorry.
There's 2 mics.
Okay, go ahead.
On the train derailment in Ohio, Secretary Buttigieg has gotten some criticism, much of it in Ohio, some of it from Democrats and Republicans, who argue that he waited too long to respond, and then he's seemed to be fixated on trying to deflect blame to the previous administration. So does the president, is he satisfied with the government's response to this derailment? And does he have confidence and continue to have confidence?
Yes, absolutely. I can answer that very quickly and very with confidence from here that we do have absolute confidence in Mayor Pete. And I always say that, Secretary Buttigieg. All right. Thanks. Go ahead.
Thanks, Karine. There's been some reporting about this, but it would be great to hear about it from you. When did the U.S. first begin tracking the balloon? Was it when it first took off from Hainan Island?
So that's a good question. I know that the Pentagon has answered that before, actually laid out a timeline of when that all occurred. I don't have that in front of me to share with all of you, so I would point you to the Pentagon. And so, again, they've had detailed information on the tracking of the balloon and when it was first, I guess, seen or visible to them, and also laid out when the president was informed. I just don't have that it's in great detail. I just don't have that in front of me at this time.
And has the intelligence community now concluded that it likely began heading east but veered off course, and that's why it ended up traversing the United States?
So look, I want to be really mindful here because I've heard this before. I don't have any specifics to share on that. You're talking about the Hawaii and the Guam piece to this. So I just want to be super careful there, and I would probably refer you to the Pentagon. And what we think that they are doing is they are deflecting. They're coming up with excuses and trying to spin this. And at the end of the day, their surveillance balloon was indeed in our airspace. And they said it was, as you all know, they said it was a potential weather balloon, which it was not. And so it's been very clear. All of the American people, the entire world saw what China did, and it was irresponsible.
Chinese officials were initially not very responsive, for example, when the Secretary of Defense tried to get a hold of them. Are they being more responsive now?
So I'll say this, our approach with China is going to continue to be calm, resolute, and practical. And we have said this before, we are going to continue to keep our airways, our communication lines open and continue to have those conversations as we have been before the China surveillance balloon and after. But look, again, what they did was irresponsible. It is up to China to decide how they want to move forward with this relationship. As you all know, the President and President Xi met at the G20. They said that they would be good actors. They were a country that we can work with. And let's see, are they going to build on that and show that is something that they are willing to do? And that's on them.
But are they picking up the phone? Are they communicating?
I'm not going to go into details on diplomatic conversations or discussion that's currently happening, but I can say that the lines of communication has been open. There has been discussions, like I said, days before the balloon went on its path, and certainly after.
Karine, thank you so much. The Vice President said on China, kind of following up on what Nancy was asking you, I don't think this issue with the Chinese spy balloon has changed relations with China. Does the president agree with that assessment? How is the administration viewing the broader?
I mean, it's very much to what I was just saying, what our approach for China is going to continue to be, which is calm, resolute, and practical. We're going to, the president has been very clear, we will continue to keep open lines of communication with China. That has not changed. And we saw China's behavior. It was irresponsible and visible.
Changed in the wake of this, Karine, because we heard a lot of top officials say clearly this was a violation of the U.S. sovereign airspace.
And you've heard us say this from here too. It was a violation of U.S. airspace, and we have been very clear with our communications with China. That has not changed. You saw how Secretary Blinken postponed his trip to China because of their irresponsible behavior. I don't have a trip to announce from here or when that trip is going to continue. That is something that the secretary is going to decide with the president. But again, we have been very clear. What China did was irresponsible. It was irresponsible actions.
What's the level of expectation that Secretary Blinken will meet with his Chinese counterpart in Munich?
I'm not going to get ahead of that. Like I said, the lines of communication has continued to be open, and we will continue to have those discussions. And again, and as I mentioned moments ago, you're going to hear from the president. He's going to speak very decisively about our response to China's high-altitude surveillance balloon. So you'll hear from the president, and he'll lay that out.
I'm going to try one more time on Nikki Haley's comments. I heard you respond to what she said. But more broadly speaking, if the American public decides or it becomes clear that there's a broad desire to have a competency test for all of the candidates above the age of 75, would the president submit to that?
I'm just not going to get into hypotheticals from here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Karine. Can you talk about what qualities the president would look for in the next World Bank president, and are there any candidates at this time?
I don't have anything to share on that, and I'm just going to let the president do his process and how he's going to move forward, but I'm not going to go into details.
One more. Tesla workers in Buffalo, New York say that a number of employees were terminated after they announced plans to form a union. Does the White House have any response to that?
So not going to speak to specific efforts from here, but what I'll say is the president supports fundamental rights for workers under the National Labor Relations Act, including the right to organize free from intimidation or coercion. That's why he's adopted a strong leadership team and increased funding for the NLRB, and has urged Congress to pass the PRO Act to strengthen opportunities for private sector workers to make a free and fair choice. But I'm not going to speak to the specific actions that have been reported today.
Can I follow on the Tesla question? Biden has obviously said he's the most pro-union president. I mean, does he think that Tesla acted inappropriately or illegally?
I hear the question. I'm just going to say that we're just not going to speak specifically to those actions, but clearly the president supports the rights for workers under the NLR Act. So I'll just leave it there.
And then just another one on the Till screening later. Can you say who from the administration or from the family will be actually in attendance, or maybe some of the cast?
I mentioned that there will be some members of the cast there, some civil rights leaders there, some members of the family will be there. Just don't have a list to share with you at this time. But this is something that the president and the first lady is very much looking forward to it. Remember, we are in Black History Month, and we think it's important for it to screen this movie, a very incredibly powerful movie. As you know, Emmett Till was part of the reason the civil rights movement started. And so we are very much looking to welcoming the family, civil rights leaders, and also the cast here.
Can you give an update on efforts to recover debris from the 3 unidentified floating objects?
So as we have mentioned before, because of the weather condition, it has been very difficult to get the debris. And so we are, allowing the Pentagon and the Department of Defense to do their work in trying to bring the debris that is clearly in the water to the ground, and so we just don't have much to share there. But what I can say is, when I've been asked what are they exactly, while we can't definitively say without analyzing the debris what these objects were so far, we haven't seen any indication of anything that points specifically to the idea that these 3 objects were part of the PRC surveillance program, or that they were definitively involved in external intelligence collection efforts against the United States. We can also rule out that they were operated by the U.S. government. Right now, the intelligence community is considering, and I've said this before, you've heard my colleagues from NSC say this before as well, is that they could be tied to commercial or research entities and benign. Efforts are actively underway at all sites to find what is left of these objects so that we can better understand them. The president has directed his team to make sure that we're briefing Congress on a regular basis, as you have seen us do the last 2 days. But again, because of the weather, because it is February and it has been very difficult to get the debris from the objects, it has taken us some time.
As the president plans this trip to Poland, polls indicate that public support is shifting away from the war in Ukraine, or at least that there's growing public concern that too much is being spent on this war helping Ukraine. Is part of the goal of the president's speech to speak to a domestic audience, or is this primarily about the global, meeting with leaders?
I would say more broadly, anytime the president speaks, he's clearly speaking as well to the American people, even if he's abroad. And so I think that's always important to note. Look, this is going to be the 1 year he's going there ahead of the 1 year anniversary and sending a strong message of solidarity. And the president understand and to reaffirm, right, our support for the Ukrainian people as they're fighting back against a brutal war that Russia started almost a year ago. And the president believes it's important to show that solidarity. It's important to show our partnership and that we are indeed supporting our NATO allies. And so that's what you're going to see. And also the eastern flank, right? We're going to Eastern Europe, as you just mentioned. And so, look, we're going to show that unity. We're going to show that support. We're going to show that it is important to be there when a country is fighting for their democracy, fighting for their sovereignty. And that's what you're going to see from the president. And of course, anytime the president speaks, he's of course speaking as well to the American people.
The mayor of East Palestine said yesterday was the first time he had heard anything from the White House about the train derailment. Could you talk a little bit about the White House's outreach and what you plan to do in the days ahead and why you hadn't reached out earlier?
So again, the health and safety of the community is our top priority. I mentioned, I believe on Tuesday, that EPA had been on the ground since February 4th. And so they have been on the ground for some time, but I can give you a little bit of where we are today. President Biden spoke directly to Governor DeWine to offer federal assistance, and the EPA administrator, Michael Regan, is in East Palestine now. I believe he's going to be holding a press conference in about 20 minutes or so, and to talk about the ongoing efforts and what we're doing on the ground. Multiple federal agencies have been on the ground, as I just mentioned, some of them since February 4th, working hand in glove with the state and local officials who are leading the emergency response efforts. They're working to get to the bottom of what caused the derailment, monitoring air quality, collecting soil samples, testing surface and groundwater for any contaminants. And I know we understand the residents are concerned, as they should be, and they have questions. That's all understandable. And we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to try and figure out an answer to what occurred. So we're going to get through this together. We're going to hold Norfolk Southern accountable. And right now, our message to folks in Ohio in that area is to listen to your state and local officials. It is important to listen to them, to allow them to do their work, and we are going to do everything that we can to keep that community healthy and safe and get to the bottom of this as well. Okay.
Thank you, Karine. About the president's health, more broadly than the doctor's report and so on that we're waiting for, can you speak to how confident he is that he's going to feel up to it? He's going to feel good getting up in the morning to do this job, very grueling job, not just today or even in 2 years to finish out this term, but in 6 years from today, when he would obviously be 86.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Well.
Yes, you asked me if he's going to be up to it. Yes.
No. I asked, does he express how confident he is?
I mean, look, we get this question a lot, as you all know. And here's what I have to say about it. The president always says this, which is watch him. And if you watch him, you'll see that he has a grueling schedule that he keeps up with, that sometimes some of us are not able to keep up with. He was State of the Union, I believe he spent 90 minutes speaking to the congressional members in front of him, to the American people. After that, he spent an hour shaking hands and saying hello and greeting the congressional members and their guests. And this is a president that works day in and day out in a grueling fashion, with a grueling schedule, and delivers. And let's not forget, it is interesting that we get this question about this president who has had one of the most historical presidency in his first 2 years than any other president, almost any other president. And you think about the historic pieces of legislation that he's gotten through that many have made jokes about. You think about the bipartisan legislation, bipartisan infrastructure law that, the last guy joked every week that it was infrastructure week and could not get it done. Many presidents tried to get that done and could not get it done. And this president did it in a bipartisan way. And there's a long list that I can go through. I know you guys don't want to hear me go through them at this time, but we have talked about them over and over and over again. And it is surprising that we get this question when you look at this record of this president and what he has been able to do and deliver for the American people. And he is able to do that because he's clearly capable in so many ways and so many levels, and he's going to continue to do that in the years coming.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. There is an interagency delegation that's visiting Riyadh, Saudi Arabia currently, and they're meeting with high-level officials from GCC countries. Is the meeting meant to counter Iran activities in the region? Is it strengthening the relationship with the GCC countries, especially in counterterrorism?
So, yes, I saw that the delegation, I have a response for you here. The senior officials of the United States and members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, convened a meeting of the working group on Iran at the GCC's headquarters yesterday, as you noted. The working group affirmed the longstanding partnership between the United States and the members of the GCC and our shared determination to contribute to regional security and stability. The United States and GCC member states condemned Iran's continued destabilization policies, including its support for terrorism and the use of advanced missiles, cyber weapons, and unmanned aircraft systems, and their proliferation in the region and around the world. The United States and GCC member states raised their grave concern about the Iranian military's deepening two-way cooperation with state and non-state actors, including Iran's ongoing provision of conventional weapons, advanced missiles, and the UAS systems to the Houthis that have prolonged the conflict in Yemen, worsening the humanitarian disaster there. They further underline that Iran's nuclear advances, as documented by the IAEA, have no credible civilian purpose and are gravely exacerbating regional and global tensions. They called on Iran to immediately reverse course, cease its nuclear provocations, engage in meaningful diplomacy, and fully cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency investigations. The United States and GCC member states expressed their commitment to expanding defense cooperation, and I will leave it there.
Just to follow up on the settlements question, will there be any consequences for Israel over this expansion and of the outposts? And
I'm not going to go beyond the statement that we've put out. State Department actually spoke to this as well, as I just laid out how we see what just occurred with the settlement. I'm just not going to go beyond that. Go ahead, Stephen.
A question for the record about the physical, and then I'll ask you something else. The last time the president had a physical in November of 2021, he was sedated during a colonoscopy. Power was temporarily transferred to the vice president. Did that happen today?
So last year, as you know, he had a colonoscopy last year, and which was entirely normal, and therefore he did not need a screening this year. So that's why you won't see that occurring once again this year.
This morning, CBS News reported that an unknown number of veterans, service members who were kicked out of the military for being gay or lesbian, have tried to get their discharges upgraded from less than honorable. Apparently, there's a bureaucratic morass. It can take months. Is the president aware of this problem? Is there anything he can do about it?
So the president, and you've heard him say this before, you've seen it in statements, you heard him say it, he believes our country and our military are stronger when everyone qualified to wear the uniform can do it without discrimination. That is the president's belief. That's something the president also believes very strongly, given his leadership helping repeal, if I know you follow this, the terrible policy of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which inflicted great harm on service members and their families. Under his leadership, the military doesn't just welcome LGBTQ plus service members, it's led at the highest levels by brave LGBTQ plus veterans. It's concerning, it is very concerning that veterans who were unfairly discharged under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been facing these challenges to upgrade their discharge, denying them benefits they have earned. And it's something we are definitely going to look into. The Department of Defense has worked to simplify the process of applying to the Military Department Discharge Review Boards to correct past records. And they have also conducted outreach campaigns to make sure that veterans know how to access this process, which is critical because no veteran should feel overlooked or that the process is inaccessible. So something that we are looking towards, and we find this, we think it's an important issue that we need to make sure that we evaluate and assess.
Hi, Karine. I just wanted to ask about the East Palestine matter again. So there, in the immediate aftermath of that, Norfolk Southern offered a rather modest donation to residents, $25,000. And last night there was a public meeting at which Norfolk Southern didn't appear. What did the White House make of that response?
Say that one more time, Norfolk Southern.
There was a public meeting at which its representatives did not appear, having previously said they would do. What does the White House make of it?
So look, I can't speak to the appearance or non-appearance of them. What I can say is what we're focused on. As I mentioned, there is a multi-agency response to what is occurring in East Palestine. And we take this very seriously. We are going to be committed to making sure that the safety and the health of the community is addressed. And as you just heard me say, the EPA administrator is on the ground currently, and the president has been in regular touch with the governor.
And just to follow up with one thing, there was a bipartisan letter, one Republican and 3 Democrats, calling for the EPA to use its existing authority to ensure that Norfolk Southern pays for the cleanup. Is that something the White House?
Look, as you know, there's an active investigation underway. So the National Transportation Security Board is on site and looking into the cause of the derailment. I just don't want to get ahead of it at this time. But again, an active situation happening. Okay, you have the last question.
I want to ask you the congressional budget report. So the president said that he has cut the deficit over the past 2 years, but isn't that misleading for Americans because it was the COVID spending that ended that really brought that money down, as well as the president signing an increase in ongoing federal spending. And now the CBO is saying the federal deficit this year is $1.4 trillion and averaging $2 trillion until 2033.
So look, the president has long made reducing the deficit and being fiscally responsible as a priority. He did that as a president. He believed that as vice president, and something he believed as a senator. And I think look no further than his speech yesterday. Look no further also, I guess, his speech, the State of the Union, where he said that he's going to continue to cut the deficit by $2 trillion in the upcoming fiscal year 2024 budget. And that's something that you all are going to see on March 9th when he puts forth his budget. And this is something that the president is completely committed to, and he has proven that he can do it just the last 2 years. But here's the thing, you have congressional Republicans who want to increase the deficit by $3 trillion. When you think about repealing the Inflation Reduction Act, when you think about extending the Trump tax cuts, that is $3 trillion that they are looking to balloon the deficit. And so their plan actually doesn't help what they're listing out that they want to do. And they also want to give tax cuts to the wealthy. That is what they want to do. That is how they're moving forward. The president has been very clear. You see it in his record, $1.7 trillion. Then you're going to see it again when he puts his budget out on March 9th.
Are there spending cuts in that budget as well as tax increases?
I'm not going to get ahead of the president. I'm just saying what he laid out to all of you yesterday, $2 trillion. He's going to lower the deficit, and that shows fiscal responsibility. And that's something that the president has talked about as vice president, as senator, and he's shown it. He has the receipts. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Karine, as the president talked about